I'm Sarah, and life for me had always been a high-wire act of sorts. In our family, there were a few key players: my husband Mark, our charming bundle of joy Liam, and the ever-present, sometimes overbearing Linda, my mother-in-law. These characters, well, they shaped the story of our lives in ways I couldn't have predicted. Linda, a quintessential grandma, was a constant presence. She had this knack for doting on Liam like he was the heir to a throne. Anytime I needed to dash off to one of those nerve-wracking job interviews, which felt like they were multiplying faster than rabbits, Linda was my go-to babysitter. She'd step in without a second thought, a beacon of reliability amidst my job-seeking chaos. Linda's past as a retired kindergarten teacher had always made me feel at ease, leaving Liam in her care. Her nurturing and loving demeanor had been a source of comfort, and it had seemed natural to rely on her when I needed help. Little did I know that the events that would unfold would challenge my trust in her and the delicate balance of our family. One bright, sunny day, my phone rang with a call that felt like a ray of hope breaking through the clouds. I had scored a job offer. The elation I felt was almost surreal. It wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline for our family. But as I shared the news with Mark and Linda, little did I know that this newfound stability would tip the scales in unexpected ways. Sitting around the worn kitchen table, I brought up the pressing matter of a car. With the new job, I'd need it for the daily commute. Seems reasonable, right? But then, Linda dropped a bombshell. "You're planning to spend all that money on a car?" Linda's voice was tinged with disbelief. "What about our anniversary trip to that lovely resort? I thought you and Mark were going to treat us." I blinked, bewildered by the sudden twist in the narrative. Linda seemed convinced that the money we were about to shell out for the car should have been spent on her anniversary getaway. It was a plot twist of epic proportions, and I wasn't prepared for it. "Mom," Mark interjected, trying to reason with her, "the car is essential for Sarah's job. We can't afford both right now." Linda wasn't backing down. "You're both being selfish," she snapped, the disappointment in her eyes weighing heavily on us. What started as a reasonable conversation soon turned into an intense argument, the tension palpable. Our family's delicate equilibrium had been disrupted, and we were teetering on the precipice of a tumultuous journey we couldn't foresee. So, after the argument about the car and the anniversary trip, things were pretty tense in our family. But amidst all the chaos and misunderstanding, there was a glimmer of hope. Let me tell you how the silver lining began to peek through. Mark and I knew we needed that car for my new job. We just couldn't afford to delay it any longer. We had long talks late into the night, trying to figure out how to make it work. It wasn't just about convenience. It was about securing a stable future for Liam and us. Linda, on the other hand, was still sulking. She wasn't speaking much to us, and when she did, it was often icy and curt. It was tough, no doubt about it. I missed the way things used to be, when Linda was like a second mother to me. One evening, after we'd put Liam to bed, Mark and I sat down to address the elephant in the room. We needed to find a way to mend things with Linda while staying true to our priorities. "Maybe we should talk to her again," Mark suggested cautiously. I nodded, feeling a bit apprehensive. "You're right. Let's try to make her understand our situation, Mark. It's not like we're denying her a trip on purpose." The next day, we approached Linda. Her initial reaction was still cold, but as we explained our reasons, her expressions started to soften. "I just thought you were putting your jobs ahead of family," Linda admitted, her voice tinged with regret. "Mom," Mark said gently, "we're doing this for Liam's future, too. We want the best for him." As the conversation continued, we realized that Linda had misunderstood our intentions. She thought we were neglecting her for our careers, when all we wanted was stability and security for our family. Slowly but surely, the rift began to heal. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but things got better. Linda understood our perspective, and we, in turn, made an effort to involve her more in our daily lives. We realized that family support was crucial, and we didn't want to lose that. The silver lining was that this challenging period helped us communicate better as a family. It made us appreciate each other's roles and sacrifices. And as we moved forward, we hoped that this newfound understanding would help us navigate the trials that lay ahead. Little did we know that the story was far from over, and more challenges were yet to come. With our family on the mend after the car and trip argument, things started to look up. But, life sometimes takes unexpected turns. This time, it came in the form of an unforeseen twist. Linda had always been a big part of our lives. She'd take care of Liam when we needed her, and we appreciated that. But after our heart-to-heart chat, things had changed. Linda seemed less involved, less like the grandma we knew. It was like a cold wind had swept through our family. One evening, we had another family dinner, but it felt different. Linda had a tense look on her face as she served the meal. Something was up, and I could feel it. As we sat down to eat, Linda hesitated, and then she just blurted it out. "I can't believe you're spending all that money on a car instead of our anniversary trip." Mark and I exchanged glances, stunned by her outburst. "Mom," Mark started, "we talked about this. The car is for Sarah's job, and it's important." Linda's eyes welled up, and I could see the hurt in her face. "I thought you cared about me," she said, her voice trembling. "We do care, Mom," I reassured her, "but this is about our family's future." That's when Linda dropped the bomb. "Fine. If you won't take us on the trip, I won't be able to afford to feed Liam anymore. I won't have extra money for his lunches." I felt my heart sink. She was using Liam as a pawn in our argument, and it was the last thing I expected. I couldn't believe she'd stoop so low. Mark was furious. "You can't do that, Mom. Liam is your grandson. You can't just stop taking care of him." But Linda was adamant. "I have to make sacrifices too," she said, her eyes filled with resentment. That dinner was one of the most uncomfortable moments of my life. We finished our meal in silence, and as we left, the tension hung heavy in the air. It was shocking to see how far things had escalated. Linda, who had always been a loving grandma, was now using Liam as a bargaining chip in our family dispute. This wasn't the Linda we knew, and it left us reeling. The delicate balance we had tried so hard to restore had once again been thrown into disarray. After the shock of Linda threatening to stop feeding Liam, our family life took a dark turn. It was like a thread had been pulled, and everything began to unravel. Liam was just a child, innocent and unaware of the tensions between us and his grandma. He still looked forward to visiting Linda, but as the days passed, he came home hungry and upset. I couldn't believe she was actually going through with it. Mark and I knew we had to have another conversation with Linda. It was clear that things couldn't continue this way. So we invited her over for dinner, hoping to find a resolution. As we sat down at the table, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension. We didn't want to argue, but we couldn't let Linda's actions continue either. "Mom," Mark began cautiously, "we need to talk about Liam. He's hungry when he comes home, and it's not fair to him." Linda didn't back down. "I told you, I can't afford it with the money you're spending on that car." I could see the frustration in Mark's eyes. "Mom, you can't punish Liam like this. He's just a little boy." But Linda remained stubborn. "I have my needs too. You should be taking us on that trip." The conversation went in circles, and it became clear that Linda wasn't willing to budge. She saw this as a way to pressure us into funding her trip, and it was tearing our family apart. We left that dinner with heavy hearts, knowing that we had to protect Liam from this toxic situation. We decided not to take him to visit Linda anymore until this was resolved. It was a difficult decision, but we couldn't let our son be used as a pawn in this battle. Our family was unraveling, and we needed to find a way to put it back together. As days turned into weeks, our family remained at an impasse. The decision to stop taking Liam to visit Linda was one of the hardest choices we'd ever made. Liam, at such a tender age, didn't understand the intricacies of the conflict. He missed spending time with his grandma and kept asking when we were going to visit her again. It broke my heart to see him so confused and hurt. Mark and I would sit down and discuss our options late into the night, trying to find a solution. We knew that keeping Liam away from Linda was causing him pain, but we couldn't let her continue using him as a pawn. One evening, as Liam played with his toys, I looked at Mark with tear-filled eyes. I hate that we're doing this to him, but we can't let her manipulate us with his well-being. Mark nodded, his expression heavy with sadness. I know, Sarah. It's tearing me apart too, but we have to protect our son. And so, we continued to keep Liam away from Linda. It was an agonizing decision, but we hoped that it would force Linda to reconsider her actions. We were determined to make her understand that we couldn't be blackmailed into funding her trip. Weeks turned into months, and our communication with Linda remained sparse. The pain of not having her in our lives was immense, but we held firm in our belief that this was the only way to resolve the conflict. We hoped that eventually, Linda would come to see the error of her ways, and we could rebuild our family's trust. Little did we know that the next chapter in our story would bring an unexpected turn, one that would take place at Linda's anniversary party and would have repercussions we couldn't have predicted. Months had passed since we made the painful decision to keep Liam away from Linda. Our family remained divided, and it was clear that the rift was not going to heal easily. But as Linda's anniversary party approached, we had no idea just how significant that event would become. We debated whether or not to attend, but Mark felt it was important to show that we still cared about Linda, even though we disagreed with her actions. So, with mixed feelings, we decided to go. The party was a grand affair, filled with friends and family, all celebrating Linda's anniversary. The atmosphere was cheerful, but the tension between us was palpable. As the evening wore on, I noticed Linda watching us closely, her eyes filled with a mix of longing and resentment. It was as though she expected us to make amends by offering to fund her trip. I had had enough of the charade, and I decided it was time to make a statement. I took a plate of food and, without saying a word, I shared it with Liam. It was a small but deliberate act, and it spoke volumes. Other guests at the party began to notice and started asking questions. "Why is Liam eating separately?" one of Linda's friends inquired. I took a deep breath and decided it was time to tell the truth. Liam was going hungry because we couldn't afford his lunches after buying a car for my job. Linda thought we should have used that money for her anniversary trip. The shock on their faces was evident, and whispers began to spread throughout the room. Linda's attempt to manipulate us had been exposed, and the guests were not pleased. Linda tried to defend herself, but it was clear that her actions had crossed a line. The party atmosphere soured, and we left shortly after, with our heads held high. That night marked a turning point. We had stood up for ourselves and for Liam, and we had let the truth be known. It was a defiant act, one that would change the course of our relationship with Linda forever. In the aftermath of the party, we decided to cut ties with Linda altogether. The chapter of our lives that had revolved around her had come to an end, and we were ready to move forward as a family, free from manipulation and deceit. Months had passed since the painful rift between us and Linda. The decision to keep Liam away from his beloved grandma had weighed on our hearts every single day. Yet, as Liam's longing for her grew more palpable, Mark and I found ourselves reconsidering our stance. Liam would often ask about his grandma, wondering why we hadn't been to visit her. It was heart-wrenching to see him miss her so much. One evening, as he clutched his favorite stuffed animal, he looked up at us with big, questioning eyes. "Mama, Dada, when are we going to see Grandma again?" His innocent inquiry tugged at our heartstrings. Mark glanced at me, his expression filled with concern. It was a question we couldn't ignore any longer. "Sarah," he whispered, "maybe it's time to think about reconnecting with Linda." I hesitated. The memories of the pain Linda had caused us still fresh in my mind. But deep down, I knew that we couldn't keep Liam away from his grandma forever. We needed to find a way to bridge the gap. The decision was made, and we decided to reach out to Linda, inviting her to our home. It was a fragile step toward reconciliation, one filled with hope, but also trepidation. The day Linda came to visit, the air was thick with unresolved tension. As she entered our home, the awkwardness hung like a cloud, a stark contrast to the warm embraces that used to define our family gatherings. We exchanged polite greetings, but the weight of our past conflicts hung between us like an invisible barrier. As we settled in the living room, the silence felt suffocating. Over cups of tea, we finally began to talk. Mark and I shared our reasons for keeping Liam away and the pain it had caused us. Linda, for the first time, listened without interruption, her eyes filled with regret. "I never meant to hurt Liam," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I let my desire for that trip blind me to everything else." We took a deep breath and told Linda how important it was for us to protect our son from emotional manipulation. We made it clear that we wanted her to be a part of Liam's life, but on terms that respected our family's well-being. Tears were shed, apologies were exchanged, and for the first time in a long while, there was a glimmer of hope for our family. It was a fragile reconnection, one that we knew would require time, patience, and understanding. As Linda left, we watched her go with a sense of cautious optimism. We were hoping that this conversation would bring healing and a chance for our family to rebuild what had been broken. Our attempts to rebuild a connection with Linda had been a delicate process, but there was an elephant in the room that neither Mark nor I had expected to address so soon: Linda's unresolved desire for the missed anniversary trip. One evening, as we gathered around the dinner table, the conversation took an unexpected turn. Linda, who had been more reserved about her disappointment lately, seemed unable to keep it in any longer. "You know," she began hesitantly, "I still can't help but feel disappointed about missing that trip." Mark and I exchanged glances, knowing that this was a discussion we needed to have sooner or later. We had hoped it wouldn't come up so soon, but it seemed that Linda couldn't contain her feelings any longer. "Mom," Mark said gently, "we've explained why we couldn't afford both the car and the trip. It wasn't an easy decision." Tears welled up in Linda's eyes, and her voice trembled with emotion. "I just thought you were putting your jobs ahead of family," she admitted, her disappointment and hurt becoming more evident. "We do care, Mom," I reassured her, "but this is about our family's future. We have to make the best choices for Liam and us." The conversation went in circles, and it became clear that Linda wasn't willing to let go of her desire for the trip. She saw this as a way to pressure us into funding her dream vacation. But what happened next blindsided us all. A few days after that dinner, Linda, in a moment of carelessness, made a slip of the tongue. She was talking to her sister-in-law, Carol, on the phone, and in the midst of their conversation blurted out, "You won't believe it, Carol. Mark and Sarah are finally getting us that resort trip for our anniversary." The words hung in the air, and Linda's eyes widened as she realized what she had just revealed. Her sister-in-law's reaction was a mixture of surprise and confusion. "You mean Mark and Sarah are paying for your trip?" Carol asked, her curiosity piqued. Linda backtracked, trying to downplay her slip. "Oh, I meant they're considering it, as a surprise." But it was too late. The cat was out of the bag, and Carol was left with the impression that Mark and I were planning a surprise anniversary trip for Linda and her husband. Word spread like wildfire in Linda's circle of friends and family. The news of our supposed generosity reached the ears of many, and they couldn't help but share their thoughts and congratulations. As the days went by, the situation became increasingly awkward. Linda's slip of the tongue had created a false narrative, one that we hadn't intended. Mark and I found ourselves caught in a web of expectations and assumptions, and it seemed that Linda wasn't eager to correct the misunderstanding. The constant pressure from Linda's intrusive requests had left Mark and me feeling exhausted. It seemed there was no end to her expectations, and we began to wonder if there was a way to put an end to this cycle of emotional manipulation. One evening, after much deliberation, we made a bold decision. We decided to give in to Linda's demands, but with a cunning twist that would ensure she'd think twice before asking for more. It was time to prove a point and regain control of our family's boundaries. In a move designed to both appease and discourage, we selected a trip for Linda and her husband. It was the most inexpensive option we could find, a journey to a destination so obscure that it was challenging to locate on a map. To make our scheme foolproof, we ensured that the place had no internet access. The day we presented the itinerary to Linda and her husband, their faces lit up with anticipation. They believed it was the extravagant getaway they had been dreaming of. With excitement in their eyes, they eagerly examined the flight details and accommodations we had arranged. Unbeknownst to them, the remote destination was intentionally chosen to be off the grid. Once they arrived, they would be disconnected from the online world, with no means to contact us. To seal the deal, we turned off our cell phones, ensuring there would be no way for Linda to voice her complaints or demands. As Linda and her husband embarked on their adventure, they were blissfully unaware of our crafty plan. Their vacation was indeed memorable, but not in the way they had anticipated. In the aftermath of these events, Linda stopped contacting us, and we had no intention of following her lead and giving in to her emotional manipulation. We had made our point and regained control of the boundaries that were essential for our family's well-being.